The sound of gunfire echoing through the valley made Emma Vance drop the bucket of feed she was carrying. Her heart hammering as she watched three riders thunder past her family's failing farm just outside Douglas, Wyoming Territory, in the summer of 1878. She pressed herself against the weathered barn wall, waiting until the dust settled and silence returned to the parched land that had become more burden than blessing. Her father had died 2 winters ago, leaving her and her younger brother to manage what little remained of their homestead. The drought had been merciless. The cattle had long since been sold for less than they were worth. And now it was just Emma, 17-year-old Thomas, and a few stubborn chickens that refused to stop laying eggs despite their own hunger. Emma bent to retrieve the scattered feed, her worn dress catching on a splinter. She tugged it free, adding another tear to the collection that marked her daily struggles. At 22 years old, she had the hands of a woman twice her age, calloused and rough from dawn to dusk labor that never seemed to make any difference. The bank had sent another letter last week. She had until the end of August to come up with 3 months' worth of payments, or they would lose everything her parents had built. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she finished her chores, her mind working through possibilities that all ended the same way: failure. She had nothing to offer anyone who might help. No money, no prospects, no beauty to speak of with her sun-darkened skin and perpetually tangled brown hair. Thomas did what he could, but he was still young, still growing, and needed more food than they could afford to give him. She was walking back toward the house, a structure that leaned slightly to the left and needed new shingles desperately, when she saw a lone rider approaching from the east. Emma's hand instinctively went to the rifle propped near the door. Strangers could mean trouble, and trouble was something they definitely could not afford. The rider came closer, and she could make out details. A tall man on a paint horse, wearing a dusty brown hat and a leather vest over a faded blue shirt. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who had spent more of his life in a saddle than on the ground. When he was close enough, he raised one hand in greeting, keeping the other visible on his saddle horn, a gesture of peace. "Afternoon, madam," he called out, his voice deep and rough like gravel shifting. "I don't mean any trouble. My horse threw a shoe about a mile back, and I was hoping I might water her and maybe get directions to the nearest smithy." Emma studied him carefully. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a striking blue-green, like the river used to look before the drought. There was something honest in his face, though Emma had learned that faces could lie as easily as words. "There is a smith in Douglas about 5 miles west," she said, not moving from her position near the rifle. "You can water your horse at the trough there." She gestured toward the old wooden trough near the barn. "Much obliged," he said, dismounting with a fluid grace. He led his horse toward the water, speaking softly to the animal. "Easy there, Juniper. We will get you fixed up soon enough." Emma watched as he let the horse drink, noting how he checked her hooves with gentle competence, how he ran his hand along her neck in reassurance. A man who treated his horse well usually had some decency in him. "You have quite a place here," he said, glancing around at the farm. Emma heard what he was too polite to say, had being the operative word. "It was my father's," she replied, her voice flat. "He had hopes for it once." The stranger straightened, meeting her eyes directly. "And you, what are your hopes for it?" The question startled her with its directness. Most people did not ask what a woman wanted, especially not a woman in her circumstances. "I hope to keep it," she said simply. "That is all I can afford to hope for right now." He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she had said. "Name is Kane Young," he offered. I have been working cattle drives up from Texas, but I am looking to settle somewhere. Getting too old to spend 8 months a year eating dust and sleeping on rocks. Emma Vance, she replied, still wary but feeling her guard lower slightly. This is my land, what is left of it. Kane looked at the fields, at the barn, at the house with its crooked walls. Then he looked back at her with those startling eyes. You run this place yourself. My brother helps. He is in town today, trying to get work. She did not know why she was telling this stranger anything, but something about his steady presence made the words come easier. That is a lot for 2 people, Kane said. Especially in a drought year, we manage. It was a lie, and they both knew it. Kane was quiet for a moment, then said, I noticed your fence line is down along the south ridge, saw it as I was riding in. You get wanderers through here often. Often enough, Emma admitted. I cannot fix everything that breaks. I am decent with fence repair, Kane said, almost casually. If you had some wire and posts, I could get that secured before I head into town. Consider it payment for the water. Emma wanted to refuse. She did not need charity, did not want to owe anyone anything. But pride was a luxury she could not afford, and a broken fence was an invitation to squatters and thieves. We have some supplies in the barn, she heard herself say, but I cannot pay you. Did not ask for pay, Kane replied. Asked if you had supplies. Something in her chest loosened at his words, at the way he phrased it to preserve her dignity. I will show you, she said. They walked to the barn together, and Emma pointed out the meager collection of fencing materials they had left. Kane assessed it with a practiced eye, then nodded. This will do. It will take me a few hours. You mind if I leave Juniper here while I work? She needs the rest more than new shoes right this minute. That is fine, Emma said. Then, surprising herself, she added, There is fresh water in the kitchen if you get thirsty. Just come knock. Kane's face broke into a smile that transformed his weathered features into something approaching handsome. Thank you, Miss Vance. That is kind of you. Emma returned to the house, but found herself watching through the window as Kane loaded materials into a wheelbarrow she had not even known still worked and headed toward the south ridge. He moved with purpose and efficiency, and she felt an unfamiliar flutter of something in her chest. Hope, maybe, or just the strange comfort of not being entirely alone with the weight of everything. She forced herself to focus on her own work, preparing the meager dinner she and Thomas would share, mending the endless tears in their clothing, trying not to calculate how many days they had left before they had nothing. But her eyes kept drifting to the window, to the figure working steadily in the afternoon heat. It was nearly evening when Kane returned, his shirt dark with sweat, his face streaked with dirt. He knocked gently on the doorframe, and Emma came out with a pitcher of water and a tin cup. Fence is secure, he said, accepting the water gratefully and drinking deeply. Should hold you through the season at least. You have got some rot in a few posts, though. They will need replacing before winter. I know, Emma said quietly. Before winter, they would not own this land anymore. Before winter, none of it would matter. Kane studied her face, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he could read her thoughts. Miss Vance, he said slowly, I am going to speak plainly because I am not good at dancing around things. I need a place to stay for a while, somewhere I can work and save up for my own land. You need help keeping this place running. Seems like we might work something out. Emma stiffened. I told you I cannot pay. I heard you, Kane said patiently. I am not asking for pay. I am asking for a place to sleep, meals when there are meals to be had, and honest work. I know how to run a farm, Miss Vance. I grew up on one before I started driving cattle. I can help you make this place productive again. Why? Emma asked bluntly. Why would you work for nothing? Kane looked out over the land, at the burnt grass and the tired buildings and the endless sky above it all. Because I have been drifting for 6 years, and I am tired of it. Because I see a place worth saving and a woman brave enough to try saving it alone. Because sometimes helping someone else is the same as helping yourself. Emma felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. I have nothing to offer you, she said, her voice rough. This place is dying. The bank is going to take it in 6 weeks. There is no future here. Kane stepped closer, his expression serious and intent. You have everything I need, he said simply. A chance to put down roots, a reason to stay in one place. And from where I am standing, 6 weeks is plenty of time to turn things around if we work together. That is impossible, Emma whispered, but she wanted desperately to believe him. Maybe, Kane acknowledged, but I have made my living on long odds and longer trails. Let me try, Miss Vance. Let me help. If we fail, at least we will fail together, and that is better than failing alone. Emma looked at this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, offering help she could not afford to accept and could not afford to refuse. Every practical bone in her body screamed that this was foolish, that nothing could save the farm now, that letting a strange man stay on her property was dangerous and improper. But there was something in his eyes, something steady and true, that made her want to take the chance. There is a small room in the barn, she said finally. It is not much, but it is dry. You can stay there. I will feed you what I can. But if we are going to do this, you need to understand the situation. We owe the bank $240. We have $18.30 total. We have no cattle, no crops planted, and no prospects. The only things we have of value are our chickens, our dignity, and our stubbornness. Kane's lips quirked. Well, Miss Vance, I have worked with less, and those chickens are going to help us more than you might think. Before Emma could ask what he meant, Thomas came riding up the path on their old mule, his young face bright with excitement. Emma, I got 3 days' work at the Murphy Ranch. They are short-handed for haying, and Mr. Murphy said he would pay 50 cents a day. He pulled up short when he saw Kane standing there, his excitement turning to wariness. Who is this? Thomas, this is Kane Young. He is going to be helping us on the farm for a while. Emma kept her voice calm and matter-of-fact, trying to project a confidence she did not entirely feel. Thomas looked between them, his 17 years evident in the way he tried to assess whether this stranger was a threat. We cannot pay hired help, he said carefully. Good thing I am not hired help then, Kane said easily. I am more of a partner. Your sister is giving me room and board, and I am going to help get this place back on its feet. That work for you? Thomas looked at Emma, a question in his eyes. She gave him a small nod, and she saw him relax slightly. I guess that is all right, he said. But if you cause my sister any trouble, you will answer to me. Kane's expression was entirely serious as he said, That is fair. I respect a man who looks after his family. Thomas seemed satisfied with that. He dismounted and led the mule toward the barn, his step lighter than Emma had seen in months. The $1.50 he would earn was more money than they had seen in weeks. That night, Emma lay in her narrow bed and listened to the familiar sounds of the old house settling. But there was a new sound too, the quiet presence of someone in the barn, someone who had chosen to stay and help for reasons she still did not fully understand. She thought about Kane's words, about having everything he needed, and wondered what kind of man saw value where everyone else saw failure. Sleep came slowly, but when it came, it was deeper and more restful than any she had known in months. Emma woke before dawn, as she always did, and was surprised to find Kane already up and working when she emerged from the house. He had cleaned out the chicken coop and was reinforcing the wire that kept predators out. You are up early, she said, carrying a basket for egg collecting. Habit, Kane replied. On a cattle drive, you are up before the sun and working until after it sets. This feels like sleeping in, honestly." They worked in companionable silence for a while, and Emma found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. He moved with the efficiency of someone who did not waste motion, who had learned to conserve energy for when it was truly needed. His hands were scarred and calloused, working hands that told stories of hard years and harder work. "You said the chickens were going to help us," Emma said finally. "What did you mean?" Kane straightened, wiping his brow. "How many eggs do they lay in a week?" "About 4 dozen, give or take." "And what do you do with them?" "We eat what we need and sell the rest in town. Gets us maybe $2 a week if we are lucky." Kane nodded. "That is what I figured. But here is the thing. People in town are buying those eggs to eat immediately or maybe keep for a few days. What if we could sell them something that would last longer? Pickled eggs, for instance. I learned the recipe from a ranch cook in Texas. Vinegar, spices, a little sugar. They keep for months, and cowboys on trail drives pay good money for them because they are protein that does not spoil." Emma considered this. "We would need vinegar, jars, spices. That all costs money we do not have." "We have $18.30, Kane reminded her. "And Thomas is bringing in another $1.50. That is almost $20. We spend $5 on supplies. We can pickle 3 dozen eggs. Sell those for 10 cents each instead of the 2 cents you are getting now. That is $3.60 instead of 72 cents. Even accounting for costs, we double our money. Then we do it again, bigger. In a month, we could have enough to make a real payment to the bank." Emma wanted to argue to point out the 1,000 things that could go wrong, but the logic was sound, and more than that, it was hope. Real, tangible hope. "All right," she said. "We try it your way." Kane's smile was like sunrise. "You will not regret this, Miss Vance. I promise you that." They spent the morning planning, and Emma felt something shift inside her. For months, she had been drowning, gasping for air, watching everything slip through her fingers no matter how tightly she held on. Now, suddenly, she had a partner. Someone who saw possibilities where she saw only problems. Someone who had chosen to stay. Over the next week, their little farm transformed. Kane was everywhere, fixing things Emma had given up on, finding solutions to problems she had thought unsolvable. He repaired the pump so water flowed easier. He reinforced the barn walls. He even managed to get the old plow working again, though there was little to plow in the drought-baked earth. Emma found herself watching him more than was probably proper. She noticed how his hair curled when he sweated, how his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he was always gentle with the animals and patient with Thomas's endless questions. She noticed too how he never stood too close to her, never made her feel uncomfortable or threatened, always respected the boundaries of their arrangement. Thomas took to Kane immediately, following him around like a devoted puppy whenever he was not working at the Murphy Ranch. Kane taught him how to throw a rope properly, how to read the weather in the clouds, how to tell if a fence post was set deep enough. He treated the boy with respect, as an equal, and Thomas bloomed under the attention. The pickled eggs were a success beyond Emma's hopes. The general store in Douglas agreed to stock them, and they sold out within 2 days. Kane negotiated a deal with the owner. They would supply 2 dozen pickled eggs every week, with the option to increase if demand continued. By the end of the second week, they had earned back their initial investment and had $15 profit besides. Emma stood in the kitchen, counting the coins with shaking hands. "This is real," she whispered. "This is actually working." Kane, who had come in for water, nodded. "It is a start. We need to keep at it, though. One good week does not solve everything." "I know," Emma said, "but it is more than we have had in a long time. "Thank you, Kane. I do not know how to thank you properly." Kane looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You are doing the work, Miss Vance. I am just helping you see what was already there." "Emma," she said suddenly, "you have been here 2 weeks, sleeping in our barn and eating our food and fixing our farm. I think you can call me Emma." Something warm flickered in Kane's eyes. "Emma," he repeated, and the way he said her name made her stomach flip. "And you should call me Kane. No more of this Mr. Young business." Their eyes met and held, and Emma felt the air between them change, become charged with something she was afraid to name. She looked away first, her cheeks heating. "I should get back to work," she said, her voice a little breathless. "Emma," Kane said softly, and she turned back despite herself. "You are remarkable. I want you to know that. The way you have kept this place going, the way you have taken care of your brother, the way you keep fighting even when everything seems hopeless. That is not nothing. That is everything." Emma felt tears sting her eyes. "I do not feel remarkable. I feel tired and scared and like I am barely holding on." Kane took a step closer, still respecting her space but near enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his blue-green eyes. "The bravest people are always scared," he said. "They just do what needs doing anyway. That is you, Emma Vance." She wanted to close the distance between them, wanted to lean into his strength and let herself be held for just a moment. But it was too soon, too complicated, too much. So she just nodded and said, "Thank you," in a voice barely above a whisper. The moment passed, and they returned to their separate tasks, but something had shifted between them. Emma felt it in the way her heart beat faster when Kane was near, in the way she found excuses to be where he was working, in the way his eyes followed her when he thought she was not looking. Thomas noticed too. One evening, as they were preparing for bed, he said casually, "Kane is sweet on you." Emma nearly dropped the brush she was using on her hair. "What? No, he is not. He is just helping us with the farm." Thomas gave her a look of teenage skepticism. "Emma, I am 17, not 7. I see how he looks at you, and how you look at him when you think no one is watching." "Even if that were true," Emma said carefully, "it does not matter. We cannot afford any distractions right now. We still owe the bank almost $200, and we have less than 5 weeks to get it." "Maybe Kane is not a distraction," Thomas said. "Maybe he is the solution, not just to the farm but to everything." "What do you mean?" Thomas shrugged. "I mean, maybe you do not have to do everything alone anymore. Maybe it is okay to let someone help, to let someone care about you." Emma sat down heavily on her bed. "I am afraid," she admitted quietly. "I am afraid to hope, Thomas. Everything else has fallen apart. What if this does too?" "Then we pick up the pieces and keep going, same as always," Thomas said with the simple wisdom of youth. "But what if it does not fall apart? What if it works? Are you going to miss out on something good because you are afraid of it being bad?" Emma had no answer to that, so she just hugged her brother and told him to get to sleep. But his words echoed in her mind long into the night. The next day was Sunday, and Emma decided they should all go into Douglas for church. It had been weeks since they had attended, too caught up in survival to think about their souls. Kane agreed readily, though he admitted he was not much of a church-going man himself. "Never felt comfortable in a building full of people who thought they were better than me," he said with a wry smile. "But I understand the value of community, and it would do you good to be seen with help. Shows people you are not giving up." Emma had not thought of it that way, but Kane was right. Appearance mattered, especially in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. If people thought she was managing, the bank might be more willing to work with her. They cleaned up as best they could, and Emma put on her only good dress, a faded blue cotton that had been her mother's. Kane wore his cleanest shirt and actually shaved, revealing a strong jaw and a small scar on his chin. Emma found herself staring and had to look away quickly when he caught her. The ride into Douglas was pleasant, the three of them sharing the wagon seat, with Kane handling the reins. Thomas kept up a steady stream of chatter, pointing out landmarks and telling Kane stories about the town. Emma sat between them, acutely aware of Kane's solid presence beside her, the way his shoulder occasionally brushed hers when the wagon hit a rut. Church was at the small white building on Main Street, with Pastor Daniels presiding as he had for 15 years. People stared when they walked in together, and Emma heard the whispers start immediately. She kept her head high, though, her hand on Thomas's shoulder and Kane a steady presence behind them. They slid into a back pew, and Emma tried to focus on the service, but she was too aware of the eyes on them, the speculation. After the service, they were immediately surrounded by curious neighbors. "Emma Vance, who is this young man?" asked Mrs. Henderson, the town's most notorious gossip. "This is Kane Young," Emma said evenly. "He is helping with the farm." "Helping?" Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose. "And where is he staying?" "In the barn," Emma said firmly, meeting the woman's eyes. "Everything is entirely proper, I assure you." "I am sure it is, dear," Mrs. Henderson said in a tone that suggested she was sure of nothing of the sort. "It is just unusual, that is all. A young, unmarried woman and a strange man living on the same property." Kane stepped forward slightly, his voice polite but firm. "I understand your concern, madam, but I assure you Miss Vance's reputation is safe with me. I am simply a hired hand, nothing more." It was the right thing to say, the proper thing, but Emma felt an unexpected pang at his words. Nothing more. Was that really all he was? All he wanted to be? They escaped the church as quickly as politeness allowed, and the ride home was quieter than the ride there. Thomas fell asleep in the back of the wagon, exhausted from his week of haying, leaving Emma and Kane alone with their thoughts. "I am sorry about that," Emma said finally. "Mrs. Henderson is a notorious busybody." "She is not wrong, though," Kane said quietly. "The situation is unusual." "People will talk." "Let them talk," Emma said with more bravado than she felt. "We know the truth." "And what is the truth, Emma?" Kane asked, his eyes still on the road ahead. Emma's heart pounded. "The truth is you are helping me save my farm. That is all that matters." Kane was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Is that all it is? For you?" Emma could not answer that, not honestly, so she said nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and unnamed feelings. When they reached the farm, Kane helped Thomas down and half-carried the sleepy boy into the house while Emma unhitched the wagon. It was a reversal of their usual roles, and Emma found herself smiling at Kane's easy care of her brother. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and worry. The pickled eggs continued to sell well, and they expanded their offerings to include pickled vegetables from the few plants in Emma's struggling garden. Kane bartered for goods when he could, stretching their money further than Emma had thought possible. But it was not enough. By the first week of August, they had saved $93, less than half of what they owed. Emma lay awake at night doing the calculations, trying to find a solution that did not exist. They had 3 weeks left, and at their current rate, they would come up more than $100 short. Kane found her crying in the barn one evening, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He did not say anything, just sat down beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. Emma stiffened for a moment, then collapsed against him, letting herself be held for the first time in longer than she could remember. "We are not going to make it," she whispered against his chest. "I thought we could, but we are not. We are going to lose everything." Kane's arms tightened around her. "We have not lost yet," he said quietly. "There is still time." "Not enough time," Emma said. 3 weeks. We need almost $150 in 3 weeks. It is impossible. Kane was quiet for a long moment, his hand rubbing gentle circles on her back. Then he said, I have some money saved, about $60 from my driving days. I can contribute that. Emma pulled back, staring at him. No, absolutely not. That is your money, your future. I cannot take it. You are not taking it, Kane said firmly. I am giving it. There is a difference. Kane, you have done so much already. You have worked for weeks for nothing but food and a place to sleep. I cannot ask you to give up your savings too. You are not asking, Kane pointed out. I am offering. Emma, this place, you Thomas, this has become my future too. I have more invested here than just money. Surely you know that by now. Emma's heart stuttered. What are you saying? Kane took both her hands in his calloused fingers warm and strong. I am saying that I came here looking for a place to belong and I found it. I am saying that I came here planning to stay a few days and I cannot imagine leaving. I am saying that somewhere along the way, helping you save your farm became helping us save our farm. Kane, Emma whispered, afraid to believe, afraid to hope. I am saying that I have fallen in love with you, Emma Vance, Kane continued, his voice rough with emotion. I do not know when exactly it happened. Maybe when I first saw you standing by that barn, trying to be brave when you were terrified. Maybe when you agreed to let me help even though every instinct told you not to trust me. Maybe it was when I watched you count those first earnings with tears in your eyes. But it happened, and I cannot pretend otherwise anymore. Emma felt tears streaming down her face, but they were not tears of despair anymore. I do not have anything to offer you, she said, echoing her words from weeks ago. I am a broke farmer with a failing homestead and a mountain of debt. Kane smiled, that wonderful smile that made his whole face light up. You have everything I need, he said, echoing his own words. Your strength, your courage, your determination. Your terrible coffee and your stubbornness and the way you sing to the chickens when you think no one is listening. You have your heart, Emma, and if you will give it to me, I will spend the rest of my life proving I was worthy of it. You love me, Emma asked, needing to hear it again. I love you, Kane confirmed. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you enough to fight for this place like it was my own. Because with you in it, it is my own. You are my home, Emma. Emma launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him with all the pent-up emotion of the past weeks. Kane caught her, holding her tight, kissing her back with a desperate tenderness that made her toes curl. It was her first real kiss, and it was everything she had never let herself dream of. Passion and safety, desire and comfort, all mixed together in the taste of salt from her tears and the smell of hay and horses and the man she loved. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kane rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? He asked, a hint of humor in his voice. Yes, Emma said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I love you. Yes, you can give us your money if you are crazy enough to do it. Yes to all of it, Kane. Just yes. They sat in the barn for a long time, holding each other, making plans, dreaming of a future that suddenly seemed possible again. With Kane's $60 added to their $93, they would have $153, enough to make the payment with $13 left over. We will have to start over, Emma warned. Build everything back up from almost nothing. Then we will build together, Kane said simply. And this time, you will not be doing it alone. They told Thomas the next morning, both the news about their feelings and the plan for the money. Thomas whooped with joy and hugged them both, then immediately started planning where they would put Kane's things when he moved into the house properly. After the wedding, Emma said firmly, blushing. Everything proper and in the right order. Then we better get married soon, Kane said with a grin. Because that barn is getting cold at night. They were married 2 weeks later by Pastor Daniels in the same little white church, with half the town in attendance. Emma wore her mother's blue dress again, and Kane wore a new shirt they had splurged on from the general store. Thomas stood up as best man, beaming with pride. Mrs. Henderson sniffed disapprovingly at the speed of the courtship, but even she had to admit they looked happy together. And when Kane kissed his bride, there was not a dry eye in the church, even among the gossips. They took their $140 to the bank the day after the wedding, making their payment with 1 day to spare. The banker, Mr. Thornton, looked surprised to see them. "Miss Vance, I mean Mrs. Young," he corrected himself, glancing at Emma's plain gold wedding band. "I confess I did not expect to see you here today." "We are here to make our payment," Emma said firmly, pushing the stack of bills and coins across the desk. $240 as agreed. Mr. Thornton counted it carefully, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he looked up at them both. "This is very impressive. I will admit, I had already started the paperwork to foreclose. How did you manage this?" "Hard work," Kane said simply, his hand resting on Emma's shoulder. "And faith." The banker stamped their receipt and handed it over. "Well, Mr. and Mrs. Young, you have bought yourselves another 6 months. The next payment is due in March." Walking out of the bank with that receipt in her hand, Emma felt lighter than she had in years. They still had mountains to climb, but they had proven they could do it. Together, the farm slowly came back to life over the following months. Kane used his knowledge from years of cattle drives to make contacts with ranchers who needed supplies. Emma's pickled goods became known throughout the county, and orders came in steadily. Thomas, now 18, proved to have a natural head for business and started keeping proper books for their little enterprise. That winter was hard, but they had enough stored food and enough money to keep the cold at bay. Emma discovered she was pregnant in January, and Kane was so excited he picked her up and spun her around despite her protests. "Careful," she said, laughing. "You will shake the baby loose." "Never," Kane said, setting her down gently and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "I am going to take care of both of you, all 3 of us," he corrected, glancing at Thomas. "This family is going to be just fine." He was right. The baby, a boy they named after Emma's father, was born in September of 1879, healthy and loud. They made their March payment early, and by the time little James was born, they had paid off half the farm's debt. Life settled into a rhythm. Thomas eventually left to start his own homestead 20 miles south, though he visited often. Emma and Kane had 2 more children, a daughter they named Grace and another son called Matthew. The farm grew and prospered, expanding to include cattle again and even some horses. But it was the small moments Emma treasured most. The way Kane still brought her wildflowers from the prairie. The way he sang to the children at bedtime. The way he looked at her across the dinner table as if she was still that scared girl by the barn, and he was still the drifter who had chosen to stay. One evening, 10 years after that first meeting, Emma stood on their newly built porch and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. The fields were green with crops, the cattle grazed peacefully in the distance, and she could hear her children's laughter from inside the house where Kane was playing some game with them. Kane came out to join her, sliding his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About the day we met," Emma said softly. "About how I told you I had nothing to offer." Kane turned her around to face him, his blue-green eyes still as striking as they had been that first day. "And what do you think now?" Emma smiled, placing her hand on his cheek. "I think you were right. I did have everything you needed, and you gave me everything I never knew I needed: hope, love, and a future I could not have imagined. Kane kissed her gently, a kiss that still made her heart race after all these years. "Best day's work I ever did," he said, "riding up to this farm." "Best decision I ever made," Emma countered, "letting you stay." They stood together in the fading light, two people who had found in each other what they had been searching for all along. The farm that had once been a burden was now a blessing, the place where their love had grown from desperate hope into solid, lasting joy. Inside, their children called for them, and they went together, hand in hand, into the warm yellow light of home. The past, with all its struggles, seemed far away now, just a story they would tell their grandchildren someday, about how love and hard work and faith had saved a failing farm and built a family. Years continued to pass, each one adding new chapters to their story. The debt was finally paid off completely in 1885, and Emma cried when they burned the mortgage papers in a little ceremony in front of the house. Kane held her tight and whispered that he had never doubted they would make it, which was a lie they both knew, but a kind one. Thomas married a schoolteacher named Sarah and had 4 children of his own. He became a successful rancher, but he never forgot how Kane had stepped in when he was just a boy who needed a father figure, even if for just a few crucial years. His oldest son was named Kane Thomas, a gesture that made the original Kane unusually emotional. Emma's pickled goods became so popular that she eventually wrote down all her recipes in a small book. Local women would come to learn her techniques, and she became known throughout Douglas and the surrounding area as the woman who had saved her farm one jar at a time. She never told them it had been Kane's idea originally. He was her partner in everything, and his ideas were her ideas. His successes were her successes. Their children grew strong and healthy. James took to farming like he was born to it, learning everything Kane could teach him about cattle and crops and the weather. Grace had her mother's determination and her father's easy way with people, and she eventually became a teacher in Douglas. Matthew was the dreamer of the family, always drawing and painting, capturing the beauty of the Wyoming landscape in ways that made even rough cowboys stop and stare. But through it all, it was Emma and Kane's love that anchored everything. They still worked side by side every day, still made decisions together, still found time to sit on the porch in the evenings and talk about everything and nothing. They argued sometimes, because two strong-willed people living together would always find things to disagree about, but they never went to bed angry, and they never stopped choosing each other. On their 20th anniversary, Kane surprised Emma with a new team of horses, beautiful matched bays that she had admired at an auction in town, but said they could not afford. "Kane Young, we have discussed this," Emma scolded, even as she ran her hands over the horses' silky coats. "We said no unnecessary expenses this year." "These are not unnecessary," Kane said with a grin. "They are an investment, and an anniversary present, and a thank you for putting up with me for 20 years. Emma turned to him, her brown hair now shot through with silver, her face lined by years of sun and smiles. "You are impossible," she said fondly. "And you love me anyway," Kane replied, pulling her close. His own dark hair was graying at the temples, and there were deep lines around his eyes, but to Emma he was as handsome as the day he had ridden up to her failing farm. "I do," she agreed, "though sometimes I wonder why." "Because I am charming and handsome and the best decision you ever made," Kane said, making her laugh. "Because you stayed," Emma corrected softly. "Because you saw something worth saving when everyone else saw failure. Because you loved me when I did not think I deserved to be loved." Kane's expression turned serious. "Emma, you have always deserved to be loved. You have always been remarkable. I just made sure you knew it." They kissed there in the stable, surrounded by horses and hay and the smell of leather, and it felt just like that first kiss in the barn all those years ago. Safe and exciting, familiar and new, everything she needed. The seasons turned as they always did. Emma and Kane weathered droughts and storms, good years and bad ones, always together. They expanded the farm to include more land, hiring hands during busy seasons, becoming one of the most successful operations in the county. But they never forgot where they had started, never took for granted the second chance they had been given. Emma made sure to help young farmers when she could, offering advice and sometimes loans to those who reminded her of her younger self. Desperate, proud, barely hanging on. Kane trained horses on the side, his gentle way with animals making him sought after throughout Wyoming. They gave generously to the church and the school, wanting to build up the community that had been their home for so long. In 1895, on a warm summer evening much like the one when Kane had first arrived, Emma and Kane sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. James and his wife had brought their 3 children for Sunday dinner, and the sound of young voices filled the air. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked suddenly. "Giving up the drifting life, settling down with a broke farmer and her mountain of problems." Kane looked at her in genuine surprise. "Regret it? Emma, marrying you and building this life is the only thing I have never regretted, not for a single moment. You know that." "I know," Emma said, "but sometimes I still cannot believe it is real, that you are real, that all of this is mine." "Ours," Kane corrected gently. "It is ours, Emma. It has always been ours." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sun set over the land they had saved together. The fields were golden with wheat, the cattle fat and healthy, the buildings strong and well-maintained. The farm that had been failing when Kane arrived was now thriving, a testament to hard work and love and 2 people who had refused to give up. "Tell me again," Emma said softly, even though she knew the answer. "Tell me what I gave you." Kane wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "You gave me everything I needed," he said, his voice warm and certain. "A home, a purpose, a family. Love that I did not even know I was looking for until I found it. You gave me yourself, Emma, and that was always more than enough." "And you gave me the courage to hope again," Emma replied. "You showed me that I was stronger than I thought, that I did not have to face everything alone. That love was not a luxury I could not afford, but the foundation that made everything else possible." They sat together as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. Inside, their family was laughing and talking, the house full of warmth and life. This was what they had built from almost nothing. Not just a farm, not just a legacy, but a love story that would be told for generations. Kane had arrived as a drifter looking for a place to rest his horse. He had stayed because of a fence that needed mending and a woman who needed help. But he had built a life because he had found, in Emma Vance, the one thing worth fighting for, a love that transformed everything. And Emma, who had once thought she had nothing to offer, had learned that sometimes the greatest gifts are the ones we do not realize we possess. Her strength, her resilience, her capacity to love and be loved, these were the things that had saved not just the farm but both their lives. As the evening deepened and the grandchildren were called inside for bed, Emma and Kane remained on the porch, reluctant to let go of the peace of the moment. They had lived through so much together, hardship and triumph, loss and gain, ordinary days and extraordinary ones. Through it all, they had held onto each other, their love the constant that made everything else bearable. "Kane," Emma said quietly, "if you could go back to that day you rode up here, would you change anything?" Kane thought about it, really considered the question. Then he shook his head. "Not a single thing," he said firmly. Every struggle, every hard moment, every time we thought we would not make it, all of that made us who we are, made us appreciate what we have. I would not trade any of it. Not even the year the locusts ate the entire wheat crop. Emma asked with a small smile. Not even that, Kane confirmed. Because you and I figured out a solution together. We always do. Emma turned to look at him fully, her eyes bright in the starlight. I love you, Kane Young. I loved you the day you fixed my fence. I loved you the day you told me I had everything you needed. I loved you the day you married me, and the day each of our children was born, and every day in between. And I will love you until my last breath. Kane cupped her face in his hands, his calloused fingers gentle on her cheeks. And I love you, Emma Young. You were worth every risk, every uncertainty, every moment of doubt. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God every day that my horse threw that shoe near your farm. They kissed then, a slow, sweet kiss that held 20 years of love and commitment and partnership. And when they finally went inside, following the sound of their family's voices, they went together, as they had done everything since that fateful summer day in 1878. The farm continued to prosper. The family continued to grow. And Emma and Kane continued to love each other with a depth and constancy that became legendary in Douglas. People pointed to them as proof that true love existed, that hard work paid off, that faith could move mountains or at least save failing farms. When Kane finally passed in 1920 at the age of 67, having lived a long and full life, Emma held his hand and whispered, "Thank you for staying. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for showing me that I had everything you needed." Kane's last words were, "You are everything, Emma. You always were." Emma lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them products of the love story that had started with a drifter and a desperate farmer. She spent those years making sure everyone knew Kane's story, how he had been the one to save them, how his love had changed everything. But her children, who knew the full story, always corrected her gently. "He did not save you, Mama," James would say. "You saved each other. That is what love does." And Emma, thinking back to that day Kane had first arrived, to the moment he had told her she had everything he needed, would smile and agree. They had saved each other. Two broken people who had found wholeness together. Two struggling individuals who had become stronger as one. When Emma died peacefully in her sleep in 1925, she was buried next to Kane on a hill overlooking the farm they had built together. The headstone, chosen by their children, read simply, "Emma and Kane Young, beloved parents and grandparents together, they had everything they needed. The farm stayed in the family for generations, passing from James to his children and beyond." And every Young who worked that land knew the story of how it had been saved. Not by money or luck or a miracle, but by love and hard work and two people who had refused to give up. The barn where Kane had first stayed was preserved and maintained, becoming a family landmark. The porch where they had spent countless evenings was rebuilt, but kept in the same style. The kitchen where Emma had first made her pickled eggs still had the same layout, though the equipment had been updated. And on quiet summer evenings, when the wind blew just right across the Wyoming prairie, some family members swore they could still feel the presence of Emma and Kane, still sitting together on that porch, still planning and dreaming and loving as they had for all those years. Their story became a legend in Douglas, passed down through generations as an example of what was possible when two people truly committed to each other. School children learned about the pickled egg enterprise that had saved the Young farm. Young couples getting married heard their story as inspiration for their own journeys. But more than the business success or the farm's prosperity, What people remembered was the love. The way Kane had looked at Emma until the day he died, as if she was the most precious thing in the world. The way Emma had trusted Kane when trust was the hardest thing to give. The way they had built something beautiful from almost nothing, together. Because in the end, that was the real lesson of Emma and Kane's story. Not that money could be made from pickled eggs, or that farms could be saved with hard work, though both those things were true. The real lesson was that love, true love, was the foundation for everything else. Kane had been right that first day. Emma had everything he needed: strength, courage, determination, and a heart capable of deep and lasting love. And Emma had been wrong when she said she had nothing to offer. She had offered everything, and it had been enough. More than enough. Their legacy lived on not just in the land they had saved or the children they had raised, but in the proof they provided that two people, against all odds, could build something lasting and beautiful. That a farm girl and a cowboy could find in each other exactly what they needed to not just survive, but thrive. The farm still stands today, still worked by young descendants, still producing the same quality crops and cattle that Emma and Kane had insisted upon. And somewhere in the farmhouse, preserved in a frame, is the receipt from that crucial bank payment in 1878, the one that had saved everything. But next to it is something even more precious. A faded photograph from their 20th anniversary, showing Emma and Kane standing in front of those matched bay horses, their arms around each other, their smiles bright and genuine. In that photograph, anyone can see what their descendants already knew, that they had found something rare and precious in each other. Emma had told the cowboy she had nothing to offer. Kane had said she had everything he needed. And they had spent the rest of their lives proving that sometimes the greatest wealth is not what you have, but who you have beside you when facing life's challenges. Their love story, born of desperation and sustained by determination, became the bedrock of a family dynasty, and a testament to the power of believing in each other even when belief seems impossible. The end.